When did you realize you married the wrong sibling? I had been married to my Annie for 6 years. We met during our last years in college and hit it off almost immediately. She was your typical blonde college girl, fun, wild, hot, and very social. I was just an international student from Europe who around the time was used to dull and introverted women all my life and felt very lucky to meet her and coincidentally after graduation, marry her. We moved to Miami because she wanted to live by the coast and wanted a house there. I obliged. Annie was a housewife, for her request, and I really didn't mind. As a lawyer, I earned more than enough to support the family on my own. I let Annie have whatever she wanted and at any amount she pleased. We had 2 children during our 6 years of marriage, and despite my working life, I contributed largely to their upbringing. She had a more social life than I did, but it was fine by me. All in all, we were all right. Everything was all right. That was what I thought. Things began to change when my wife began to get obsessed with her phone. Annie was always on her phone normally. I think she had an active social media life as well, posting videos and all that, but it began to be too much. She would just sit at a corner for hours on her phone, texting. I knew she was texting because I once caught a glance of it. I didn't know who she was texting, but I just knew it was always the same person. I didn't want to think much of it at first, but she began to act suspicious. She would start leaving the room when she wanted to take calls, and she put a password on all her devices and would always place her phone down when she charged in. When I made the mistake of confronting her about it, she went all out on me and accused me of getting in her privacy, of wanting to control her and picking on everything she does. I apologized and left her alone. My suspicions still stood, but I didn't have anyone to talk to and I was getting worried with every passing time. I've heard stories relating to what was happening and I wish that I was going to be wrong. A few days later, Annie's sister Marie came to visit. Annie and Marie were fraternal twins but did share similar traits for you to clearly tell that they were sisters. Though they were twins, they were very different, and sometimes I wonder if my life would have been better had I met Marie first. Marie was calm and mature, and she was as beautiful as her sister, and she was every other thing that Annie wasn't. She wasn't in a relationship from what I know and was focusing on her career, which was growing a skincare brand. It was because I knew her to be just an understanding that I thought about discussing her sister's behavior with her. I only held back when I remembered that all in all, Marie and Annie were sisters, and as such, there is a huge chance that this would make things worse for me. However, I did not need to contemplate any more because at the end of the day it was Marie who called me to talk about her sister. We had all been sitting at the dining room table drinking wine and eating pizza while playing a board game when Annie got a notification for a text, and from then on, she became distracted. Marie would call her back to the game every now and then. Annie got a call and stood up immediately to answer it, and I could tell that Marie was confused at her behavior because a few minutes later, when my wife did not return, Marie went to meet her and I sat alone till she came back. The first thing she asked was, "Has she always been like this? On the phone 24/7 and acting distracted and suspicious?" It was the opening I was looking for, and I told Marie everything. She didn't judge me and told me that I should look into it. She even told me whatever happened I should understand that Annie was always foolish and immature and I should always be the bigger and forgiving person. I understood what Marie was saying. If I found out that my wife was cheating on me, I should have it in me to forgive. I knew that Marie tried to talk to Annie, and I also knew that my wife did not listen. That was probably why Marie told me she would be coming off and to check on the children, and I was grateful. It was stressful doing it alone nowadays. I continued to live in doubt for weeks until one night luck shined on my side. After coming home one night from a party with her girlfriends, Annie was very drunk and half asleep as she walked into the house and threw herself on the bed. As she did, her purse fell on the floor, and as I went to pick it up, her phone slipped out and I saw that it was unlocked. This was my chance, and you can be sure that I took it. I went through her phone and what I found broke me. Annie was cheating. Yes, but she was also making a fool out of me. The person she was cheating with was a man named Tim, someone she had met on social media, and from what I read, someone she had seen a number of times. Annie's messages to this man were not only about their affair but about me because the man knew. My wife made fun of me with her lover, calling me all sorts of things, laughing at my insecurities and my deepest secrets that I entrusted to her. Annie called me a fool, mocked my love for her, and used me. I read every single message between them and listened to the voice notes too. When I was done, I sent them to my phone, dropped hers and went to sit on the couch, in the darkness and in tears. I never imagined I would feel a pain as intense as this. I felt open, I felt naked, and I felt used. What was it exactly that caused this? I gave her everything she needed. I treated her like a queen. I did whatever she asked and compromised so that she could be comfortable. I loved her to bits and she did this to me? I didn't know when I picked up the phone and called Marie. It was a good thing that Annie was dead-ass drunk or she would have heard my sobs and words. Marie didn't say much. She listened to me and consoled me, telling me it would be okay. After an hour, I decided I was better. I took a shower and slept on the couch. The next day, when Annie asked why she didn't wake up to see me on the bed next to her, I gave her the excuse that I didn't want to disturb her. Later that afternoon, when she left for the mall, I took the kids with me to see Marie, and while they played with her dog, we talked and I showed her the messages I transferred to my phone. Marie was shocked and so embarrassed that she began to cry. She told me how sorry she was that all this was happening, and I began to tell her it's not her fault. She began to say that maybe it was a mistake. I haven't exactly caught Annie red-handed. I knew she was really concerned for her sister if I divorced her. She knew how I treated Annie and how Annie was about to lose it all. I told Marie to help me look after the children once in a while and I would look for proof. I also made Marie promise me that she would not tell Annie anything. I did just that. I would wait for Annie to leave her phone and then I connected it to mine so I got all her messages. The day she told me she would have a get-together with her girlfriends in the suburbs for 3 days, I agreed. I had already let go of any feelings for Annie at this point. She was a bad wife and an unfit mother who was never there with the kids. I knew the girlfriend's tale was a lie. She was going to meet with the Tim guy. I had asked Marie beforehand to help me get in contact with the man's wife after she said she saw his profile on Facebook. Update: my family wants me to break up with my girlfriend after how she responded to my brother's prank. While a lot of you advised I wait for Lola to tell me her side before I confront my family, they all came over to my apartment yesterday morning while I was writing out a list of questions for them. I was supposed to go over the night before, but I texted them saying I needed time and if we could meet later today, but they obviously didn't like that and showed up unannounced. The fighting started almost immediately and I initially was thrown off by them being there, but I matched the energy and started yelling back at them for their predatory and enabling behavior of Ian, and how I couldn't believe they'd side with him over this, golden rainbow baby aside. My aunt got in my face about disrespect, while my mom cried and brother cussed me out, but I pointed at my computer and yelled back at them that if they genuinely believed Lola was the problem, then they were victim-blaming idiots that I wanted nothing more to do with. My mom kept crying, but I got my aunt's attention with the computer and she got close to look at the screen. I was going through comments to write up all the questions, and after a minute she turned back to us, "Really, my brother?" and said, "What is this?" I explained Reddit and that I'd posted for help. Ian then stopped comforting mom and pushed past me to get to the computer, asking what right I had sharing family business on the internet. My aunt stopped him and asked, "Why didn't you tell us you were alone with her? You never told me she was sleeping." To say all hell broke loose would be an understatement. Like a switch, my mom almost immediately stopped loudly crying and looked over at my aunt confused. Ian started shaking his head and reiterating his version of the story, which, listening to it, was infuriatingly off. I'd figured out that not only did he tell mom and our extended family a version of the story in which Lola was all too violent with him when he jumped from behind a door to give her a little spook, but he left out the details that put him in any bad light. I started yelling again, calling him a liar, but he started crying and called me a liar who was just trying to lie for my girlfriend. At the sight of my brother crying, my mom pleaded with us to stop, my aunt scrolling more on the screen. It felt like both a minute and forever that we were yelling in each other's faces about how the night went, how I felt he always used his tears to get his way, him yelling at me about how ungrateful I always was, etc. Unfortunately, I forgot where we were and didn't keep the volume down at all, and some time later there was a knock at the door. I didn't know who it could be. Some dumb part hoped Lola, though I knew it wasn't. It was 2 officers, answering to a noise complaint from one of the neighbors. Being stupid, I plainly explained that no one was hurt and we were having a heated argument, but that no one was in danger. I did let them look around and talk to my mom and brother, but my aunt spoke up when it looked like they were just going to give us a warning. "Actually, I think it's good that you're here. My nephew has something he'd like to report." She motioned to Ian, whose eyes looked between her and the officers quickly. My aunt still looked as angry when she first arrived, but she was glaring at Ian. "You know, hypothetically, if someone touches or hits you without permission or justified reason, that's something you can and should report. Is there anything you want to say?" There was silence, eyes moving to everyone around the room. My aunt didn't look encouraging in a report. It hit me that she was calling him out. I stared at him. His eyes were bulging. He looked as panicked as the other night when he was trying to get away from Lola. One of the officers asked if everything was all right, and like clockwork, Ian started bawling his eyes out. My mom asked him what was wrong. I told her she had to stop babying him. He's been lying to you guys. My aunt asking him again if he had anything to report. You were up in arms against this girl this morning. Where'd all that fire go? Did she hit you or not? It took a while of us pushing him, but he finally admitted to the room that he didn't have anything to report because he didn't feel like she'd be rightly prosecuted. His next story sounded closer to the one I knew, where he admitted to knowing Lola had gone to sleep and wanted to scare her so she'd wake up. I still don't believe his reason why he wanted her up, that he put on a mask. I asked if he knew she had a phobia. He said he knew she found them creepy, and that there was no one else in the room with them. He couldn't get any of our friends to agree to the prank, so he did it himself. He said he started making sounds against the wall. The bed was against the wall, and then got close to scream in her face. He said she woke up and surprised him because he thought the stress and panic would cause her to scream or hide, but she went for his throat instead. He described his beating to everyone in the room, some of which I saw had the officers look at each other then back at him. Then that's when I pushed the door in. The door wasn't locked. I just panicked and didn't think to use the doorknob properly. I just threw my body at the door, and the rest of his story is what I was there for. I'm sure if the police weren't there, I would have hit him. I know I would have. My mom started crying even more when he said she was sleeping, a fact that changed his entire story, and my aunt chewed him out, everyone scolding him for his stupidity and asshole behavior. While the officers explained that it sounded like if what he said was true, Lola acted in self-defense, and that not only was what he did juvenile, but one of the officers asked my mom's permission to question him more as his behavior was concerning and they wanted to make sure he wasn't a danger to himself or others. My aunt and I told the cops he was 22 at the same time, an adult, and they didn't need her permission. He looks a lot younger than he is. Upon hearing his age, one of the officers sat down with him and asked him to talk through his thought process, and the other officer explained to my mom and aunt that Lola could press charges given Ian's story. My aunt still looked pissed while my mom cried about being confused and over her baby. My mom literally looked at me and said she didn't understand how her baby could do this. I already knew I was deep in the bull crap of this family, but I realized that I couldn't grow in the earth that poisoned me, and I needed to get away if I was actually going to get better and stay better. My mom kept fussing with my aunt and another uncle on the phone crying over the drama while I texted a friend of mine who lives across the city if I could stay with him. I was feeling overwhelmed with all of them and didn't want to be within a few minutes of the source of the problem. I also wanted to give myself space to think and understand with a clear head. I'm typing this between breaks of me packing. My aunt saw me in my room doing this, but she didn't stop me. She only asked me if I'd spoken to Lola about this, and I told her I haven't yet, but I had plans to later on. She told me she was sorry for believing my brother without listening to any other account and that she hopes Lola is okay. So then it was just me in the apartment. The cops left after taking a statement from my brother and I. My mom left with my brother, still crying, my brother calling me a jerk, the world's worst brother, and my aunt gave me a hug, apologizing again for how she and her sister acted, and told me that I don't know her anything, but that she'd like to know that Lola's okay. With everyone gone, I went to my friend's house and I'll be there until further notice. He couldn't make it to the party but he heard about it from multiple people. As far as Lola, yes, I did meet with her yesterday. As excited as I was to see her, I know that most of you were telling me she was going to break up with me, so I'd been preparing for that. Whether I ended up single or not, I wanted to make sure she was okay above all. I know I don't deserve her as a girlfriend, and I'd much rather she not be with me if it meant she was safe. She brought her friend with her and we all sat and talked. I showed them both the Reddit post and Lola has asked that I not share any more information about her until she feels ready herself. She's on Reddit for gaming and general scrolling fairly often and let me know that if she came across this story without me having told her, she would have been pissed. She did however read a lot of the commenters worried about her and wanted me to express to you all that, while upset, hurt, and with mixed up emotions, she is overall okay. She doesn't like that I posted about her without at least giving her a heads up, but after I offered to take the post down, she only asked that I give her time and to leave her personal life and opinions out of anything beyond what I've already said here until she says otherwise. In short, she did break up with me, and when I told her about the police telling us that she could press charges, her friend laughed and told me that they were more than aware. She thanks everyone for their concern and told me she really hopes we both learn from this. This section was approved by her. So yeah, unless I'm forgetting something, that's all I have and can give right now. My mom has been calling and texting me, telling me that this whole ordeal has made Ian and her a wreck and she can't believe I'd let a girl do this to us. I blocked my brother right after he left my apartment, and I just blocked her. My aunt has let me know she'll talk to her, but I don't know how that's gonna go. I understand that it isn't what everyone wants, but none of this is anything I want either. To everyone who has nothing but bad things to say about me, I get it, I'm a jerk. I appreciate any and all advice I've been given. I'm gonna be taking a break from not only the bull crap in my life, but this Reddit stuff too. I know I have a lot of growing to do, and I can't do that in this environment. Thank you again to everyone. I just found out my mom spent the $100,000 inheritance my deceased grandparents left for me. I, 25 am the youngest of 3 siblings, both sisters in their 30s. My 60-year-old parents are owners of a grocery store that was passed down through my father's side of the family for generations. My grandparents on both my dad's and mom's side left me and my siblings each a college trust fund of $100,000. Each of my sisters blew through their money quickly and dropped out of college. Both of them became single mothers to my 3 nieces and came back to work for my parents' store. I was the only kid who didn't work for my parents' business, as I got a job as a landscaper for the summers and after school throughout my entire high school years. During that time I had saved up around $20,000. I got accepted into college on a partial scholarship and I was beyond thrilled because I knew I had a great opportunity to leave college debt-free and own my own home by the time I was 22. So just as my sisters did when they turned 18, I asked my parents to turn over access to the trust fund that was left for me. I wanted to have the money under my control just like my sisters did. That's when my parents told me we would discuss this at dinner tonight. I was confused, but patient enough to wait until eventually dinner came around. But the dinner table was my whole family, including my nieces, and when it was time to talk about my trust, my dad and mom asked me if I would consider holding off on accessing the trust for another 2 years, as they had to use some of the money to cover some of the health care and living costs of their grandkids, and also pay off a lawsuit that my sister Gloria received for a DUI. I asked how much they used, and my mom said there is currently $5,000 left in the account, so they spent $95,000 and none of it went to me. My dad said, "We just need you to think about your family and understand that we need your help in this request." I said, "Isn't it great that everyone benefited from this money besides the person it was intended for?" My sisters got to go to college and travel the world with their money, while with my money I got to pay for all their mistakes. My last words to my family were that this was not a request as the decision was already made and I moved out and left. I still went to college as I had a partial scholarship, and over those years I used the money I had in my savings to start my own landscaping business which employs 6 guys, and we are doing great. I never got a chance to spend any of the money my grandparents left for me as my parents never built back up the trust. 2 years ago, I found out from my lawyer when I sent in a formal request to access the trust that the current balance was $3,456.13. Less than the $5,000 my parents told me about. My sisters and parents have tried to reconnect throughout the years, but I have always resented every gift, letter, and invitation they have sent me back to them. I am getting married next month, and my fiancé wants to meet my family and help me close this chapter in my life. My fiancé wants me to forgive and move on, as I haven't spoken to them in years. I just don't know though if I can really move on from this and forgive my family. Update. My fiancé admitted to speaking with my family on Facebook Messenger, as well as meeting in person with them at a restaurant, which apparently all happened around a month ago. My fiancé said it was very emotional. I told her that I'm extremely disappointed that she withheld this information from me for a month. She told me she felt guilty and afraid to tell me because she thought I might break up with her and cancel the wedding if I found out. She wanted to wait till after the wedding to tell me. However, yesterday my mom called her directly begging her to help me reunite our family. She missed so much of my life and she doesn't want to miss another milestone like the wedding. My fiancée knows she has violated my trust and she gave me the most heart-melting sincere apology I ever heard in my life and asked for forgiveness. She even had her parents ask me to forgive her and not cancel the wedding. Her dad and mom told me they loved me and hoped I could move past this. Her dad loves me. He literally has a picture of me in his office. Just me and him. Her dad has introduced me as his son for the past 2 years. He cried and said he doesn't want to lose me as a son. There was too much I love about my fiancée and her family to let this ruin everything, so I forgave her. A couple of days later my sisters came to my business with my nieces and desperately wanted to talk. My sisters apologized and said they deeply regret their part in the decisions that were made on their behalf, and that they just want to be a family again. They understand my position and anger, but they miss me and want me back in their lives. My nieces also asked why I don't come around anymore and if I was mad at them. My sisters explained this has destroyed our parents' marriage as it has now come out that my mom apparently spent the majority of the money without my dad knowing, But then when my dad found out, my mom wanted dad to say it was both of their decision because she believes if it came out that it was her that decided by herself and not my dad, that I would never forgive her no matter what, and that I would disown her because I always accused her of playing favorites. To be honest, she is right, I would have disowned her. My mom pleaded with my dad to cover for her decision to empty my fund. Dad was furious but decided to say he and my mom decided to spend the money. Dad now resents our mom because he no longer has a relationship with his only son. He also hears from his friends how great of a relationship me and my father-in-law have. You could probably already pick up on that from the way he calls me his son. My dad told my mother either she fixes this or he is done with her, and he is telling me the truth. I told my sisters that I love them and my nieces, and I do not hate them. However, they helped rob me out of a very important gift that our grandparents gave each of us, and I missed out on life experiences that they got to experience and I did not. It's like they stole my last gift that our grandparents left for me. We all cried and I accepted their apology, but I told them I don't know how to let go of this resentment I feel towards them. I let them know our relationship will take time to rebuild. I asked them to set up a meeting with just me and dad, excluding my mom. I met with my dad alone. My dad was shocked that I requested the meeting. He looked defeated and asked to speak first. My dad told me he is and has been depressed for the last few years and feels like he truly failed me as my father, and he knows he betrayed me, and as a father, he must take that to his grave that he is the reason his son hates him. He said he is extremely jealous of the relationship I have with my father-in-law, and he just started crying for like 3 minutes straight. I told him I know it was mom who decided to spend the money. I told him I understand why he didn't throw mom under the bus, but he deeply hurt me by covering for mom's decision this long. I told him I love him and said he doesn't owe me anything anymore. He is done owing mom's debt. We both cried and hugged for like 5 minutes. I invited him, my sisters and my nieces over to dinner at my place that night without mom. I let my sisters and my dad know that if they came to the dinner with my mom with them that this would be the last time we speak. My mom clearly found out about the reunion without her and wanted to speak, but I refused her request and told her please bring a check for $100,000 if you want to talk to me. My wedding is on September 3rd and I have since invited everyone but my mom. My sisters want me to hear mom's side of the story, and my dad has said he is done covering for my mom's decision. My fiancée is happy and supports my decision 100%, even though I know she wants me to meet with my mother. She just got forgiven herself, so she doesn't want to push it. Did I meet with my mom before or after she hands me the check for $100,000? Something you'll never do again in your life. Salvia. It is the most messed up psychoactive substance in the world. My trip location was my girlfriend's place, a small 2-bedroom apartment, and I was having my 15-year-old brother trip sit me to make sure I didn't do anything stupid. This was single-handedly the most frightening experience I have ever had. I am a noob to psychoactive stuff. The only thing I had done before this was mushrooms and that experience was amazing. Now this was 40 times as strong. My brother and I drove to my girlfriend's place around 10 p.m. and we quickly got everything ready. But before I tripped, I felt like getting cookied on some Mary Jane. After getting baked, I opened the container of purple sticky salvia and grabbed a big chunk between my fingers. I put it in the bowl, hands nervously shaking, all the while spilling the substance all over the countertop. When I finally had a full bowl of the dark, dry, grayish-green leaves, I got ready to take the hit. I had told my brother to keep me on the couch at all times, as I didn't want to cause any damage to the place while in salvia land. That was a bad idea. I sat down on the couch, hands still trembling, and grabbed it. I lit up the salvia, sat back and held it for as long as I could. It couldn't have been more than 15 seconds later that I started to feel something. Start of trip. Everything in my peripheral vision started rapidly vibrating and it eventually covered my entire field of view. I don't even remember exhaling, but managed to yell the words, oh dude, out twice, before completely blacking out for a few seconds. My vision was instantly brought from first person to third person, as if it were scrolling out in a video game. I saw myself on the couch from behind when all of a sudden my body just completely snapped into this taco-shaped object at the speed of sound while hearing a violent crack. After I witnessed this, my vision seems to be scrolling out more. It scrolls out until I can finally see darkness surrounding the square image of what was left of my current reality. I start hearing everything that ever existed all at once, flooding and overloading my brain. I heard every sound frequency imaginable. If I could describe it, it would be like a buzzsaw starting up and reaching its peak, magnified by 1,000,000, multiplied by 1,000,000. The one image of my reality multiplies at indescribable speeds, going and going and going. It finally reached the point where the division of my reality had reached the edge of the universe, and I felt every single thing that ever existed at once. Every time I swallowed, breathed, moved, every other reality did the same, however lagging behind me. It felt as though when I swallowed, every other reality would swallow, and I was feeling that for what felt like literal forever. Imagine a life where all you could do is swallow, non-stop, every day for the rest of your life. That is how it felt to do anything on that couch at that moment. It seemed, however, that the swallowing and whatnot was starting to get to some ending point, and that my realities had stopped multiplying. I felt so relieved for the slightest moment when everything disintegrated from top to bottom. That is when I lost everything I knew. As it reached the bottom, I realized there was a picture behind that disintegration. I caught a slight glimpse of what I was about to be in for. It was me. It was a shape to some kind of rectangle-like object laying completely flat, face up and with my arms at my side. It looked as though my body was stuffed and filled to the brim in a see-through coffin. Not only this, but there were about 20 completely blue men holding this coffin, but holding it without using anything at all. It was just hovering above them, still. These men had very creepy, stern looks on their faces, as if they were intent on doing their job. In the background of this image was unimaginable, indescribable colors flowing and melding together, sort of pixelated in the way it was done. I witnessed all of this for about 3 seconds before I was literally pulled into the hardest, most forceful, turning and winding feeling at an amazing speed. It was these blue men pulling me along with them wherever they went. They followed some kinds of roads that went on for eternities and eternities. It was pure and utter hell. I was witnessing all of this. However, I was being zoomed in and out of third person, all the while being flipped and twisted and turned every which way there ever is and will be. I heard awful sounds and screams. After eternities had passed, it seemed as though I had reached a destination. Everything stopped and I went to third person. My coffin flipped up vertically and slammed extremely forceful and hard into a concrete wall. No, wait, I knew what this was. I could literally feel it. This was not a wall, this was a sidewalk. A sidewalk in front of my old house I used to live in, completely out of state. I had become the sidewalk. I could feel every last particle of my being spread across this sidewalk, and it eventually spread onto my old house. I spent decades living in my old house. Everything that it felt, I felt. During this time, I didn't feel so horrible. It was like I had finally felt a little bit of peace and quiet, but this peace and quiet was ripped away from me. When the little blue men came back, somehow grabbed every single particle of me and vacuumed it back into the see-through coffin. I spent more and more time being forcefully dragged and thrown around by these little blue men into various objects. There came a point where these blue men were taking me somewhere, but it was a very familiar place I was headed. I could feel it. They stopped, flipped my coffin up, but wait, what I was being slammed into was not any object at all. It was a very dark shade of green and blue. I was slammed into this color wall and was able to move. I was no longer in the coffin, and it felt as though I was being weighed down by tons and tons of sand. It took every ounce of willpower in me to navigate through this heavy, resistant sand. I started to feel closer to the surface. I wiggled my way up as hard as I could back into the couch and my own body. I was finally back in the real world. Everything looked as if I was seeing every atom and molecule of everything I saw. It was still extremely refreshing to be back. I had never been more happy in my whole existence as a human being. But these feelings were short-lived. As soon as I forced myself to stand up, I was greeted by my brother, who pushed me back onto the couch and exclaimed, "Dude, you gotta stay down." I fell back onto the couch, but shortly after was transported back to right before he said this, "Dude, you gotta stay down." I heard him yell, and then I fell back onto the couch again. This looped for literal forever, and I thought I was stuck in this looped state for the rest of my life. I was entirely convinced at that moment that I had discovered the truth behind life, which was these blue men forcing me to live meaningless, slow, painful lives as various objects, and that my own brother was in on it. He knew that the blue men would do all of this. He knew they would torment me for eternities on end. I was forcefully dragged back into the blue man world again and lived more and more lives as tables, chairs, water, plants, floors, but these lives seemed to be more depressing and meaningless. They seemed so empty, and eventually I felt as though I died. I completely disconnected from anything and everything there was. I just kinda was. But again, Salvia did not keep me grounded in one spot for long. I was hurled into another very familiar scene. It was my old house again, but this time I was inside, in the living room. I saw it vividly, every detail of it. I stuck my hand out to signal and say, "What the F?" But I stopped as I looked at my hand and noticed it was the hand of my father. My father is still very much alive, but is troubled deeply and I care for him very much. I started to feel every anxiety he had ever felt. Then next thing I knew, I was in my oldest brother's body. It cycled through endless amounts of people and places and I felt every single feeling that you could ever experience in your life. It was like getting anxiety times infinity and it was very unpleasant. While all of this was going on, I was hearing loud high and low pitched yells coming from all directions. It scared me and I felt horrible. I am not sure how I awoke, but I woke up drenched in sweat, face down on my girlfriend's couch and immediately started saying, "No, never again, I am done, dude, no," to my brother and then told him I needed water. I stood up and ran over to the sink to drink some water. Everything was still extremely distorted and I took a huge gulp of water and leaned down into the sink. The next thing I know, I'm being vacuumed into the garbage disposal and I wake up on the couch with my shirt off. Still woozy and uneasy, but feeling better. It takes me about 45 minutes to be able to function normally again. I look at the time and it is around 11:15. The trip lasted a very long time, longer than I feel it should have. I cleaned my girlfriend's place, drove my brother to his friend's house and kept thinking about the trip. It's been about 3 months since the trip. It really scared me at the time. But I feel as though I value my existence on Earth a lot more now. My girlfriend was SA ed and now I want to leave her. I realize right up front that I'm going to come across as a jerk and I will probably get lots of hate for this, but I'm looking for all points of view. A year ago, my girlfriend was SA ed as she was leaving work. While she was not killed, her attacker did threaten her with a weapon. Fortunately, the store she works at had cameras in the parking lot. In between getting video of the attack and the bank across the street, getting the attacker's car on camera, the police were able to catch him within a day. Between the video and DNA testing, he did not even contest. He just pleaded guilty in exchange for not receiving the max. Since there were aggravating circumstances, the weapon, the judge gave him a 20-year sentence, and with time for good behavior, he can be out in about 10 years, give or take. I tell you all of that to make it clear that her attacker is no longer a threat. She doesn't have to fear him coming back for her for at least 10 years or so. Obviously this was a very traumatic event in her life, and while I was not a victim per se, it was also very traumatic for me as well. I can't imagine what she has gone through and I don't compare my situation to her at all. But, I've had severe bouts of depression because I couldn't protect her. Knowing someone else was harming her sometimes was almost more than I could handle. Right after the incident, she did not want to see me. I get that. It hurt, but I understood. Her parents picked her up from the hospital and I did not see or hear from her for a week, which I sort of get. However, I think I could have gotten a text or something, just saying she was okay. Finally, a week in, her sister calls me and lets me know that she's staying with her parents and she will be calling me in a couple of days. She never called me. Instead, I once again get a text from her sister saying she would like me to come over for a few minutes so we could talk. I get up and go over. I'm greeted at the door by her mother who very calmly and very coldly starts laying out to me how I am to act and what I am to say. I am further instructed to not attempt to make any physical contact with her as in a hug or anything. Okay. Again, I get it. Major trauma. I'm sure they have been coached by therapists and counselors in what to say and do around her, so I play along. I walk in and she's sitting on a chair with her dad standing next to her and her sister sitting on the couch. As I walk in the room, the sister starts talking and telling me that my girlfriend wants me to know that she is okay, but obviously she has been traumatized and appreciates my understanding in her recovery. She never said one single word to me and barely looked at me. Again, this was right after the event, and I'm understanding that this is how it has to be. But, honest to God, that entire conversation was just awkward as hell. I leave, go home and attempt to focus on how I can help her. I start Googling how to deal with a rope survivor and what I can expect. She starts going to therapy initially 2 times a week. Then after 2 months, it goes down to 1 day a week. In the meantime, she finally makes contact with me and asks to meet at a coffee shop. I get there and she's already there and waiting. At this point in time, They had her so medicated that I was dealing with a zombie for the most part. There was no emotion and she was very methodical in her speech. Basically, she wanted to get together that day to tell me that she couldn't go out with me for a while until she got past some issues she was dealing with. Of course, I told her I understood. This was almost a month after the attack, and this was our first conversation by ourselves. So, I was already living under this assumption. I told her I would be there for her and that whatever she needed, whether that be space or a shoulder to cry on, I was there for her. I started to tell her that I loved her and she stopped me. She told me that right now she didn't want to hear that and that I had to respect her wishes. I was once again a little hurt and frankly surprised, but I said whatever she wanted. She starts texting me the next day. Little things, nothing important, but I think it is a big step in getting back to where we were. This goes on for another month and a half. I finally asked her at the month-and-a-half mark if we could meet for dinner. She didn't reply for 2 days and then said that she had to wait to talk to her therapist. Finally, she agrees to this, but sets the date for another month away. Now mind you, this is almost 4 months after the attack, and so far I've had one physical conversation with her in person and one bizarre conversation with her and her family. At this point, I'm also not being updated on her progress by anyone. Granted, I realize that I'm not officially family, nor am I entitled to do anything. But, it would have been nice to just get a text or call from someone telling me that she was doing good in therapy or was not, or anything. We went out to eat at a small bistro that we ate at all of the time. I met her there and I was waiting for her to show up. After sitting for a half-hour waiting, I texted to see what was up. I just got a text saying, "On my way." She finally arrives and sits down. I asked her how she has been, and she snapped at me and told me to not ask her personal questions. We ate and after dinner I wanted to just sit and talk because I missed the person I had talked to almost every day for the previous 3 years. But when she was done eating, she said that she was ready to go home. I asked her if she could stay for just a few minutes to talk. But, I could see that she was becoming physically anxious and I did not want to upset her, so I said that I loved her and missed her. She just walked away. She goes back to texting me the next day, like nothing had been wrong. We actually start to see each other once a week for lunch, and she's getting more and more comfortable with being out, so she sits and talks for a while. She has also started a new job, which she tells me about. This goes on for another 4 months. I'm happy to see her and all, but honestly I'm very lonely and we have not even so much as held hands. Then one day she doesn't show up for lunch. I text to see if she is okay. No reply. I call her parents to see if they know where she is and to make sure she is okay. I got the runaround from them and by this time I'm starting to get upset because I don't want to know where she was or anything. I just wanted to know if she was okay. After a while her mom says, "Yes, she is okay, but don't expect to hear from her for a while." Well, that makes me start to think she has had a relapse and is in the hospital, but what can I do? All I do is go home and try and take my mind off of it. 2 weeks pass with nothing from anybody. I'm trying my best to be reasonable here, but basically I call her sister and ask if she is still alive or what. She knew I was getting frustrated, so she apologized, but says that her sister told them to specifically not let me talk to her. At this point, I break down. I don't know what I've done wrong here. I have not pushed her. I have not tried to get her to be with me in any way other than to just talk to me. And even then I have had very generic conversations so as to not upset her. I then get a text from her asking if I would meet with her at an address I wasn't familiar with. Once I looked it up, I determined this was a therapist's office. I am told to be there at 4, which meant I had to leave work early to get there. I check in at the front desk and I'm told that the therapist wants to speak to me alone for a few minutes. She comes in and I now know where the parents were getting this from because after formally greeting me, she then started to provide me with a list of do's and don'ts. She then told me that my girlfriend wanted to speak to me and had something to tell me. I go in and she is sitting on one chair and I'm instructed to sit in the other. She has a box of tissues and has been crying. The therapist tells me that I'm here because my girlfriend has something to tell me, and that she wanted the safety of the therapist's office to feel safe. She then proceeds to tell me that the reason she did not meet me for lunch that day is because she was with another guy, somebody from her new job. They had been intimate with each other. She might as well have taken a weapon out and shot me. It couldn't have hurt anymore. I just dropped my head and began to cry. The therapist then pipes in with some logic about her taking back her control since she was attacked and how this wasn't cheating in the same sense of cheating. My girlfriend then proceeds to tell me that she does not want to lose me, and that she's just very messed up in the head, and that it was a one-time thing and blah, blah, blah. I feel very trapped at that moment. I felt like I was ganged up on, and the more I said, the more upset I got. I finally just said to her, "You haven't so much as held my hand in the past half year. Yet you can go screw some guy you met at work while I sit like an idiot waiting for my junior high-like date." This, of course, caused her to go into hysterics and the therapist asked me to leave. I apologized and told her to text me if she wants to keep working this out. I get that text later that day. Now she is all chatty and telling me that this was the worst mistake of her life, and to please talk to her. I tell her that I don't know if I can go on with this, but agree to meet her. I flat out tell her right up front when I see her, that for me to even consider going forward with this, that she has to cut this other guy off, period. She tells me that it's impossible because they work together. I tell her that I'm sorry, but I won't even consider it if she's going to see this guy every day. She decides to find another job, and after talking with my sister, who I have told everything to, she said that while it is not common, some women do attempt to have intimacy after being attacked. That way they feel like they have power again. Now, why I'm not the one who she did this with, I have no idea, but I know I feel like I'm being punished for something I didn't even do. She changes jobs and we go back to our lunches. I do this twice when I tell her that I'm getting a little tired of just meeting for lunch and doing nothing else. So she agrees to come over to watch TV with me. That has been it up until tonight. Tonight she came over and we watched 2 movies and ate pizza. During the second movie, I tried to give her a kiss. Nothing more, just a kiss. She backs away as though I was a cross, and she was a vampire and tells me she is not ready for that yet. Not my finest moment here, I admit, but I tell her that it's been a year and a month, and I have not tried one goddamn thing with her or forced her into anything. I continued that despite this, she willingly screwed some other guy months ago, but here I am still waiting to hold hands. She of course starts crying, but this time I'm not as fast to apologize. I do apologize for the tone of my voice and tell her that I would never try to force her to do anything against her will, but honestly, I feel like I've been kept on the outside. I've been cheated on. I don't care what they call it. She willingly had unprotected intimacy with someone else, and I feel like I've done everything to try and be a supportive boyfriend. I tell her that honestly, I don't want her to text me until I decide what I'm going to do. I don't want to be unfair to her, but by the same token, a year is a long time. We are really no closer to being back to normal than we were 6 months ago, and I have no idea how long this will go on. Now here is the part where if you didn't think I was a jerk before, you will now. I am just tired of not having intimacy. Look, I certainly understood not trying anything right afterwards and even months afterwards, but it's been over a year and we're not even holding hands. Frankly, the fact that she has been with someone else since this incident is killing me inside. So I told her that I'm going to think things through and promise to talk with her next week sometime, but as it stands tonight, I think I'm done. I love her. I hate the idiot who ruined both of our lives. I know this isn't her fault, and I hate that. I feel like garbage no matter what I do. If I stay, I'm going to be resentful, and even if she comes over tomorrow and has intimacy with me, it will feel like either pity intimacy or desperation intimacy. But I know ending this will be punishing her for something that isn't her fault either. My golden child sister broke my new phone that I bought for myself because I didn't buy her one too, so I sold her MacBook and kept the money. My sister is the golden child of our family, and it has been this way since she was born. My parents always wanted a girl, and rejoiced after finding out that my youngest sibling was going to be one. I on the other hand was a boy who came first, and was a failed termination. My parents both have always preferred my little sister. Although they have never said this outright, their actions make it very, very clear. I am currently 16 and my sister is 14, and my parents have already bought her a car and my dad is teaching her how to drive. As early as I can remember, my sister's achievements and special occasions were always more celebrated. She got presents on my birthday, she got to choose the cake on my birthdays, she got to pick all the family events we did. If we ever went to the movies as a family, like we did one year for my birthday, my sister got to pick the movie. I remember that day very well. Avengers Endgame had just come out, and it was all the rave at the time. I was 12 at the time, and desperately wanted to see it. However, my sister objected and wanted to go watch the Lego movie. After some back and forth, which was really just my parents telling me to be the bigger person and let her have her way. We ended up going and watching the Lego movie. One thing that hurt a lot was how much my sister relished in the favoritism of my parents, and used whatever chance she could to wrong me and let me know that our parents would always have her side. Things like her snitching on me for things I didn't do only for me to get in trouble were common. I gave up hope that they would change 2 years ago, when my parents went to a museum with my sister instead of attending my middle school graduation. That night really did break my heart, but I suppose in a sense it was necessary too. It was the day I stopped expecting anything from my parents and started working for everything myself. Stuff like this has been happening all my life, and it is a big reason as to why I'm not close with my family at all. Nowadays, I would describe my sister and my parents as my roommates. A main issue that I currently have is my sister's behavior. The years of getting spoiled and treated like a princess by my parents have led to her becoming unbelievably entitled. She expects her birthdays to be very lavish. She expects to always have the newest technologies and clothing. She owns a Gucci bags. Well, the one thing which she doesn't have is the newest iPhone. That is something I have, or rather had I should say. You see, I've been working a part-time job for the last year and a half and I've been saving as much as I can. Up until 2 weeks ago, I still had an iPhone 6, which was my first ever phone my parents bought me at 14. I had saved up way more than enough money to buy the latest iPhone, and that's exactly what I did. I remember coming home from the shop, new phone box in hand, very excited for my new purchase. I managed to use it for about a day uninterrupted, when I heard my sister complaining about me having it. "Why do you get to have a new phone when I'm stuck with this old piece of crap?" she asked me. The old piece of crap she was referring to was her iPhone 13. I told her because I worked for it, and I saved up for it, and I decided to buy it for myself. My sister proceeded to ask me why I didn't get her one. I was sort of expecting this from her, so I responded by telling her that her current phone is still new. She did not work for a new one, and shouldn't expect me to get her one. She was of course not satisfied, and in a classic move for my sister, went upstairs to tell our mother about it. I knew what was about to happen, and I mentally prepared myself for the argument that was about to ensue. My mother came down a minute later asking me why didn't I buy my sister a new phone, and I proceeded to tell her the same thing I told my sister. She was not happy, and told me that family buys things for each other. I then asked her if that's the case, why did she get my sister a car at 13 and despite me being 16 I still haven't received one, and she said it's because my sister doesn't have a job. I called bullcrap van in there and told my mother I am sick of the blatant favoritism that occurs in this house every single day, that I'm tired of my sister being treated like royalty while I'm treated like a peasant, and if they actually expect me to spend my hard-earned money on a new phone for my sister, they must be insane. My sister and my mother ganged up on me, demanding I buy her a new phone, and the argument ended with me heading out of the house to go for a walk. I came back a few hours later, only to be greeted with another argument, this time from my dad about how I should get my sister a new phone. I did not engage in it however, and went upstairs to sleep. For the next week, I was constantly berated into buying my sister a new phone, and each time I refused, my sister especially, got more and more angry. She even screamed at me once, a literal scream, that I'd better buy her the new phone. She even threatened to break my phone or throw it at a wall unless I bought her a new one, but these threats of her I took as empty as I figured there was no way she would actually go through with it. Well, 6 days ago or so I woke up to my phone not at my bedside, as well as a smashing noise downstairs. I knew it was only my sister and I in the house. Both of my parents had worked despite it being the weekend. I went down to see what the noise was about and there I saw my sister. My phone was on the table, getting repeatedly hit with a hammer. By the time I saw it, it was already totally destroyed beyond repair, and when my sister saw me she laughed and said, "Oops, that was an accident. Maybe you should have bought me a phone after all." I looked at her in pure disappointment and told her I no longer see her as my sister, and proceeded to pick up what was left of my phone and go upstairs with it. I tried my best to turn it on but it was in vain. She had totally destroyed it. Later that day I told my parents what happened but they didn't believe me, as my sister told them that I just dropped my phone. As if dropping my phone results in it completely shattering. Either way, my parents refused to do anything about it, and because there was no cameras in the house and no proof my sister destroyed it, I could not go to the police about it. It was around that time that I had enough. The same night while she slept, I took her brand new MacBook and listed it for sale, undercutting store prices by a decent amount. The MacBook was barely touched, she doesn't use it often and therefore it was in great condition. The next day I managed to get someone interested in the MacBook and I sold it. I did it all without any of my family members noticing. I managed to sell the MacBook for very close to the amount I paid for my phone. I also researched phone repairs, and it was somehow possible to repair my phone. It would cost a lot, but less than a new phone, and less than the amount of money that I got for my sister's MacBook. I'm going to go down to the repair shop in a few days. What's glorious about this whole situation is that my sister has yet to notice that her MacBook is missing. That's how entitled she is. She doesn't even notice that her latest MacBook has gone missing because she doesn't even use it. My family and I are not speaking currently, and I'm more than happy about that. Thanks for watching. All of my friends hate me because of what I said, but I don't know what I did wrong. I, 25, have my own 2-bedroom apartment that used to belong to my uncle. I made a friend during my uni years I'll call Mary, 27. Mary had quite a hard home life, too long to detail here. I let her know that if she ever needed my help, she could always rely on me no matter what. When we graduated I asked her to move in with me rent-free. She tried to pay but I knew she had a lot of debt trying to pay for uni, so I told her no and to spend her money freeing herself from it. She was so thankful for this, and I loved having her live with me. We never fought about anything. Both of us have the same cleaning habits and TV interests, so there's never any arguments over the remote or who has to take out the bins, etc. Tonight we were out at a super fancy restaurant in London as Mary had finally paid off the last of her debt, secured herself an amazing promotion at her job, and also finally passed her driving test. All these achievements in the same month were more than deserving of an award, so we splashed out. It was me, Mary, 4 of her work friends, and 2 friends we've known since uni. It was a great night, until I handed Mary a card saying how amazing she is and how lucky I am to have her as my best friend, with quite a bit of cash inside to put towards her first car. She started crying and thanking me and we hugged for a long time. When she pulled away I told her I was so proud of her for kicking life in the butt, becoming successful, and showing her dad that his jerk ways couldn't keep her down. After how she'd struggled through uni, pushing pennies together, and working crap jobs, seeing her in her dream career and being such an accomplished woman is absolutely inspiring to me. She looked mad and said, "Please don't do that, you know I don't like it when you do that." She'd never said anything like this to me, ever, so I have no idea where this was coming from. I apologized and said that I didn't realize saying these things would upset her as it's never been my intention. She just scoffed and rolled her eyes, and when I looked up at her colleagues they were all shaking their heads at me and glaring. I felt so awkward I wanted to shrink back into my own skin, and I was mortified that I hurt Mary. Mary didn't talk to me for the rest of the night and ignored me at the table. When we split up to head home, none of her colleagues even looked at me as they left. I said sorry to Mary as she was heading to her room to turn in, but she just shrugged me off, told me she was tired and that we'll talk in the morning. I'm so anxious that she'll want to move out or never talk to me again. I keep going over every interaction in my head to see if I crossed a line in the past, but she never gave any indication that I upset her saying these things before. All her colleagues messaged me saying I was an asshole for saying those things to her and belittling her, but I never ever meant any of those things like that. After all of my friends got mad and yelled at me for some unknown reason, I finally heard my roommate moving around the kitchen, so I went to talk to her. She acted totally normal and started talking to me about some drama at her work while I just stood there kind of unsure what was happening or what to do. So I apologized again. She looked up at me in confusion and said, "Why are you sorry?" I reminded her of last night and how mad she was. Then she laughed and said, "It doesn't matter, don't worry about it," and then continued making breakfast. I asked if I'd stepped over a line last night, if the money was too much and if I made her feel inferior, and she said nope. "We're cool, it doesn't matter. I think everyone just misunderstood the situation and you're taking things to heart a little too much." I told her about her friends texting me, telling me that what I said was belittling and that I was a jerk, and she just shrugged and said they probably misread things and she'll talk to them. I was so tired because I hadn't slept because I thought she hated me, that I'd hurt her and she'd never speak to me again, but she's fine. Like she's completely normal and just chatting with me as if last night never happened, but I'm just so confused. She seemed too upset, ignored me for the rest of the night, and her coworkers treated me like a criminal, but everything's okay I guess. I got a call from one of the uni friends who was at the dinner last night and we had a chat. She asked me if everything was okay between me and Mary, as she said she'd never seen Mary snap at me like that until last night. I filled her in on everything that we talked about and how confused I was as well. She reaffirmed many of my feelings about this being very out of character for Mary, as she had also congratulated Mary and said similar things, as well as given her a bit of money in a card, along with an expensive gift, as did many of the others. After talking to all of our friends, we found out it's all an effing lie. I talked to both of Mary's coworkers when they came round in the afternoon and they both denied any of that. The one I had spoken to earlier on the phone, we'll call Claire, said she'd call one of the work colleagues that she knows slightly well in order to clear things up. Let's call the colleague Jane. Jane turned up at the flat and instantly looked pissed, I almost wanted to hide behind the kitchen counter when she came and glaring daggers at me. We all sat down and I'd let Jane know that I'd spoken to Mary about last night and that she was fine, but I was still confused. Jane then laughed and said, "Oh, don't try that crap with me. You can't just pretend now that you've been exposed in public." The three of us looked at her without saying a word as we were all confused now. Claire asked her what she meant and Jane said that she knew how I really treated Mary. We both asked her to elaborate, and she stood up and went on this tirade about how I apparently regularly abuse and belittle Mary, then intimidate her into saying nothing about it and put on a smile for others. I wasn't sure whether to laugh or cry at this point. She then showed me her texts with Mary where Mary wrote to her in distress about being locked in her room because I was having a meltdown about her making friends at work, something that never happened. Claire and my other friend took the phone and looked through the messages as well, and I had to stop reading them as they all said stuff about how Mary was afraid of me and that I'd trapped her here and was extorting rent out of her. It all just leaves me numb and dead inside. Eventually Claire got to a point where Mary said I'd cancelled her 21st birthday at uni and told her she wasn't allowed to go out. The thing is, Claire and my other friend were at Mary's 21st birthday, which I'd put over £500 towards to have a themed Great Gatsby night she'd always wanted, which in the messages she was claiming never happened. We went over a lot of the stuff in the messages and realized that Mary had been spreading lies about me to all her colleagues about how I was abusive and she couldn't move out because I was charging her so much rent money. This absolutely shattered me. Mary was like a sister to me through our uni years, and I can't fathom why she'd say any of these things. It took a long time, but after Claire and my friend went over all the accusations with Jane and I pulled up my bank details to show that Mary never makes a single payment to me except for her half of the bills, she seemed to cool down and settled into the same confusion we were all feeling. She let us know that Mary told all of her colleagues this story and that the reason they were mad at me is because Mary said I like to use a manipulation tactic where I pretend I support her through everything but use her past against her whenever we're in private. They all thought that's what I had been doing. Last night, that everything I said was meant as a backhanded compliment. Claire had to calm me down as I couldn't stop crying no matter what I did for ages. It was quite embarrassing, but I just couldn't do anything else. Now I'm a little more level-headed, still mad but not crying anymore. I don't even want to look at Mary again. My friends have told me not to make hasty decisions. Even Claire said she was disgusted by the things Mary was saying about me in the texts when everyone knows them not to be true. I know that I probably won't be able to clear my name with her colleagues, but I don't really care about that. I just want to know why Mary said those things about me. My mom has been dead for 2 years, and I was just texted our secret safe word. We've only ever used the safe word 3 times. The first time we ever used it was when I was 11. My parents were divorced due to my abusive father and I was going over to see him for the first time in a few weeks. One thing led to another. Then he began to drink a lot. I just wasn't comfortable. He threw around the bottles and one of them shattered on the floor. He insisted that I stay with him on the couch. That's when I decided to text my mom. Our safe word was 2 punctuations. If I used 2 of any punctuation at the end, that meant I needed help or wanted to leave but didn't want a person near me to know. Hey Mom. Hey, your uncle just called and I might need to come get you. Can you tell your father that you have to leave? Do I have to? Yes, please pack up. That way I saved face and could blame my mom. I did use it from time to time, but it was rare. I knew I always had that safety net growing up though. I was pretty safe in the area we lived in. It was a small town on the outskirts of a college town and I was advanced for my age, so most of my friends were the kids my mom was always around with the shelters and they were pretty laid-back kids for the most part. I didn't hang out with any rebellious kids and never really did anything stupid enough to be noted until college. When I started college 2 years early, I realized really quickly how safe my little town was. I was graduating early and only 16, but the college I went to was the one right next to our town and I could live at home and drive to campus and such. I had gotten drunk a small handful of times, but my friends and I were always safe and didn't drive. My first frat party was a lot. I'd never seen so many drunk people doing such crazy stuff. It was exhilarating but also really overwhelming. I ended up finding a quiet corner with a few people chilling. I struck up a conversation with a cute guy and he offered to get me a drink. I know, dumb naive girl. I didn't think twice and drank the drink. About 10 minutes later, I started feeling really strange and went to the bathroom. I had my phone in my hand while I heard the guy knocking on the door but I could barely see my screen as I texted my mom. I'm on Ratford Street. Can I stay a little past curfew? Absolutely not. I'm coming to pick you up right now, young lady. It was all I could see to press in my rapidly blurring state before the guy managed to get the door open and help me out of the bathroom. He checked my phone, saw the messages to my mom and with a snide huff, called me a worthless baby, kicked me in the thigh, and left me sitting in the hallway alone. I know for a fact my mom got me out of a horrible situation that night. Part of our safe word was if we included an address. It was an emergency. An address meant danger. She had burned that into my memory. Know the address, write it down, copy it as a memo on your phone, anything. So, I memorized addresses before I went to parties and she saved me that night. She didn't get mad when I was drinking or somewhere she had warned me against going. She was just so worried about me and wanted me to be okay. That night, she took me to the hospital and they put me on saline and something else to help flush the drug from my system. I just remember Mom sitting by my bed, looking relieved but still worried. I didn't realize how dangerous that situation could have gotten, but she did. Beyond that, I don't remember ever needing a safe word. She talked to me and told me the hard truths of being a young woman in today's world after I sobered up, and I've been very careful ever since. Last month, my mom passed away from a fatal heart attack. She had always had a weak heart and she was saving up money to get a pacemaker, but it just didn't happen fast enough. I was completely devastated. I thought of my mom as a permanent fixture in my life, the rock that was always keeping me grounded and safe. She was immortal in my eyes and I didn't know what I was going to do, how I was going to move on with my life without my confidant, my protector. I just didn't know what to do when I opened her door and she wasn't there. I just cried. Knowing she would never be there again was just so horrible. I texted her phone and it rang on the table. I looked at it and wanted to throw it across the room, but I would never do that. I could never do that. She loved that damn phone. She loved being able to have her pictures and music all together and play her phone games. She would sit and watch short films and funny videos for hours after she should be sleeping. It was her guilty pleasure, that phone. That's when the thought struck me. I remember the funeral director told me I could place items in her casket that were important to her, and I decided then and there I would clone her phone on my computer to save all her data and pictures, and I would give her her phone. I loved the idea of her playing her phone games and laughing at videos in the afterlife. The thought made me smile and took a sliver of the grief away. I knew it was silly and I didn't know how long her cell bill would be paid for, but I just couldn't stop thinking about how fitting it would be. She always joked about coming back to haunt me just to play her games and watch videos, so why not give her something to tie her over until she sorted out how to haunt me to get her fix. Her funeral was sad but lovely. She was surrounded by her favorite flowers, tiger lilies and birds of paradise. Woman after woman came up to me and told me how much of a difference my mom made in her lives. I thought of all the lives that she touched and all the people she helped throughout her life. Despite my grief, I couldn't help but to be proud of my mom. I'm proud to be her daughter. Getting home after the wake and more condolences, I finally sat down on Mom's couch and turned my ringer on for the first time since I left for the funeral. Immediately, I got a missed text notification. It was from my mom. "I love you too." I stared at my phone. The text I had sent her the day she died was the right before it, so I knew it wasn't a spoof number. I thought for a minute that this was some prank, but I couldn't figure out who would do something like this. It had double punctuation. Nobody knew about that except me and her. I decided to assume it was a well-meaning friend of my mom, so maybe shared her number. I responded, "Please don't text me from this number. This is my mom's number and she just passed away." I waited. I saw the ... of typing. My heart was in my throat as I waited to get a text back from whoever was using my mom's phone number. "I'm at redacted location. Can you come visit me?" My heart froze in my chest. I hadn't noticed on the first message. I was too freaked out. 2 periods. I reread the second message. That was the cemetery's location with 2 question marks. She had to have been buried alive. I called the funeral director and begged him to meet me back at the plot. Something was wrong. He swore up and down she couldn't be alive. They didn't do an autopsy, but she was dead. I just cried and begged and showed him the text until he finally agreed to meet me and help me find out what was going on. I put that phone in my mother's casket myself before they sealed it and lowered it down. Nobody has that phone, but her finally convinced nothing would soothe my panic crying. He called an emergency exhibition. The ground was still freshly filled in, so getting her dug up fast was easy. They opened her casket and her phone was in her hand rather than in the purse at her side. Her put in there with her on her screen was an unsent message to me. That was the day they found the first body. Searched my parents' names on the dark web. The videos I found were horrifying. When my friend first introduced me to the dark web, I was amazed at how such an unknown thing could house some of the most illegal things on earth. Up until today, I had only used it for learning how to code and commit small crimes, but after the horrifying videos I just found, I don't think I'll ever use the dark web again. I first met my best friend Rupert when I started my freshman year of high school. My parents had moved us to a new town and I had no friends. We moved because they were paranoid after our neighbor was found murdered in his home. I thought this was weird, moving across the country over that. but I let it go. The reason Rupert and I became friends so quickly was because we both had a shared interest in the internet and everything it had to offer. I was a gaming addict and a tier 3 Pokemon subscriber, while he was more of a coder and developer. 2 years later we were still best friends, but now we were much older and smarter. Rupert had discovered the dark web and he was obsessed with it. He pretty much spent every hour of the day on it, searching through anything you could imagine. There was nothing wrong with this, but one search he made was the biggest mistake of his entire life. I remember waking up to dozens of text messages from him one morning. This wasn't normal. Rupert wasn't a very social person and it was very hard to get words out of him. I opened my phone to see what he had messaged me. "Dude, Jack, you have to come over right now. This is important. Jack, please wake up. This is urgent. Where are you?" These were only some of the messages, but the rest were very similar, with them all being urgent, and that I needed to go to his house immediately. My parents were both at work still, so I went over to Rupert's house. When I arrived, there were 4 cop cars parked in front of his house, and there were dozens of people in news vans standing out front. I made my way through the crowd and Rupert's mother told the police to let me inside. I could see tears rolling down her cheeks as she opened the door. "What's going on, Mrs. Gonzalez?" I asked. "Rupert's missing," she said as she started crying. My heart sank. How could this happen? He had just texted me earlier that morning. That was when it hit me. What if he was trying to warn me? What if his text messages were related to his disappearance? Still in shock, I walked up to one of the detectives in the kitchen. "Is Rupert going to be okay?" I asked. "Of course he is. He's going to be just fine. We're going to find him very soon," one of the detectives responded. Something about that response was off. It was like I knew he was wrong. Deep down, I had this slight feeling that I wasn't going to see him ever again. I remembered the text messages, however, and pulled out my phone to show it to the detective. "He texted me this morning. What if this has something to do with him going missing?" I said swiftly. As he began reading them, his expression quickly changed. It was like he got worse. He told me they needed to keep my phone for now to investigate the text messages and said they would give it back to me later. I stayed around the house for a while, not just because I missed Rupert, but because I wanted to comfort his parents. They cared about me a lot, and it hurt to see them like that. His mother couldn't stop crying. Eventually, however, I went into Rupert's room to see if I could find anything that might give a clue about why he went missing. I searched through everything, but I found nothing. But then I noticed something. Rupert's computer was on, but his monitor was turned off. I looked for the button to turn it on and hit it. As the screen lit up, my heart sank. He was on the dark web. Obviously, this was normal, but for some reason he had dozens of different tabs opened. I knew this part wasn't normal, so I closed the door and locked it and began going through them. At first, it was all pretty usual for him, but then things started to get weird. He had a tab open that was an article about a murder that had happened several years ago. The article said that it was a woman who was found dead in her apartment. Her body was mutilated, cut up, and covered in acid. I nearly threw up reading it and seeing the horrifying pictures of the crime scene. Not wanting to see any of it anymore, I switched the tab, just to reveal another article about another murder. Confused, I quickly went through the rest of the tabs he had opened and they were all the same thing. They all were about some type of murder or crime. The one that stuck out the most to me, however, was one about a murder that had happened 2 years ago. At first, it seemed pretty normal, but as I read further, I realized what it was. It was about the murder of our neighbor that prompted us to move away. Confusion quickly swept over me. How did Rupert know about this? I never told him about it, because to me it wasn't that important. I figured it must have just been a strange coincidence, but then I saw the last search he had made on his computer. It was my last name. Horrified and confused, I quickly stumbled out of his room and back to the living room. "Is everything alright?" Rupert's mother said, sniffing away her tears. "Yeah, I just need to go home for dinner," I responded. On the way home, so many questions and thoughts filled my mind. Why was he searching up my last name? Did he think that I had something to do with this? That must have been why he was texting me so frantically that morning. If only I could just explain to him that I didn't do anything wrong, but I couldn't. He was still missing, and I had to find out why. When I got home, I raced to my room and slammed the bedroom door shut and got on my computer. I loaded up my Tor browser and turned my VPN on. I knew what I had to do. I began typing in the letters of my last name, becoming more nervous after every letter. When I finally hit enter, Nothing happened. It was just a blank screen. Confused, I refreshed the page, but once again, there was nothing. But why did Rupert search this if there was nothing? I thought to myself. There must be something out there. I was getting ready to close the tab, thinking I had ran into a dead end when suddenly, the page started to load. It took several minutes, but finally it loaded to reveal hundreds of videos. Immediately, I knew what they were. They were murders. But why did they show up when you searched my last name? I considered just stopping right there and turning back, knowing the horrifying things I would see if I continued on, but I couldn't. I knew this had to be why Rupert went missing, so I clicked on the first video. As it started playing, I saw what looked like a woman strapped to a chair in some sort of basement or something. I quickly recognized who it was. It was our neighbor from 2 years ago. I could tell because she had the same heart-shaped tattoo on her neck. She sat there for a minute, struggling, panicking and screaming for someone to help. However, suddenly two figures walked into frame. At first I couldn't tell who they were, but as they turned around to face the camera, my heart sank. It was my parents. My father was holding a knife while my mother was holding a small scalpel. They paused for a moment before they started what was the most horrifying 5 minutes of my entire life. I watched as they cut her into pieces, and listened as she begged for mercy, screaming the whole time. Blood filled the room as she took her last breath. When the video ended, it quickly went to another, revealing the exact same room and chair I had seen before. I was traumatized by what I had already seen, and I knew I couldn't watch any more of it. My parents were murderers, and I now knew the real reason we moved away 2 years ago. I knew there was something off about that, but I just never could have imagined that this was the horrifying secret that they had been hiding from me. This whole time I thought Rupert was trying to accuse me of being responsible for these murders, but I was so wrong. He was trying to warn me. I scanned through more of the videos, each in the exact same room. I was just about finished, ready to go to the police, so that I could tell them about what I had just seen when I noticed something. There was a new video uploaded today on the website. I quickly clicked on it and pressed play to reveal what looked like a man this time. Strapped to the chair. He had a sack over his face, and I couldn't tell who it was. Once again, however, I saw my parents walk into the frame. My father walked up to the man and pulled the sack off his head. At first, I couldn't tell who it was, but then I realized who I was looking at.
My sister-in-law wouldn't save my drowning kid because of her trauma, and now I'm being told I overreacted by screaming at her. For context, I, 30 female, have one daughter named Heather, 2 female, with my husband. My brother, 36 male, is married to my sister-in-law, Kelly, 37 female. She has one son from an ex, 12 male, and one daughter, Sadie, 3 female, with my brother. We've never been super close, but before all this we had a good relationship overall, and I liked her. Kelly has a fear of going into water. When she was 6 she was at a family barbecue and began to drown in the pool. There were so many kids splashing around in the water the adults just thought she was playing or something like that. She lost consciousness and came very close to dying. She got into therapy, and has since allowed her son and Sadie to learn how to swim. When Sadie was 1 or 2 years old, she'd only allow it as long as her son or my brother were right next to her. Now she seems fairly laid back over having her kids in the water even without strict supervision. This was surprising to me, but it's her life, so I never commented. A few months ago she and my brother even told me she was doing exposure therapy and slowly learning to not let her fears control her. She's even had a small swim lesson and was feeling fairly calm walking around in a shallow pool. Every Thanksgiving and Christmas we go to visit my parents in the retirement neighborhood in Florida. Kelly has told me all about her past and the time we spent together there for the holidays. It has a nice community pool with a recreation center. There's only a lifeguard on duty Saturday, but the recreation center has employees at the front desk if you go inside. While we were there for Thanksgiving, the Weather Channel predicted only one day would be nice enough for the kids to swim. My sister-in-law, brother, husband and I were planning to take them in the late afternoon. Grandparents were busy with some other event that day. I fell and sprained my ankle. My husband said he'd drive me to an urgent care. I didn't want my daughter to miss the pool outing, so I said I'd allow her to go with my brother's family. My brother and nephew promised to be by her side the whole time. My brother and nephew apparently wanted to play ping pong on the table that was in the recreation center. Sadie and Heather were still splashing in the shallow 3 feet end of the pool with Kelly watching in a lounge chair. She said they could go because she'd keep an eye on the girls and go get them if they get into any trouble. Kelly had put Heather in a pool tube around her waist to float. Somehow Heather flipped over and was stuck upside down in the water. She began to kick and panic, so Sadie got scared and started to cry. Kelly noticed and also started to freak out. She began to scream at Sadie to get her out or flip her back over. Sadie tried at first but wasn't strong enough and couldn't get a good grip. Plus she was scared and confused from her mother's yelling. I know she has a legitimate trauma, so I understand why that would scare her and would have been fine with her not jumping in herself. I wouldn't be so upset if she then had the common sense to run into the recreational center to grab anyone else to save my daughter. It was the next building over. If she had ran inside to ask for help, everything would have turned out a lot better. I have no idea what was going on in this woman's head, but she grabbed the pool net to try and get Heather out. This would have made sense if she had used it to guide my daughter to a place she could grab her out, but it seemed that she tried to carry my daughter in the net, and when she didn't fit she moved to a different strategy that looked like just awkwardly smacking her. This moved Heather to the deeper part of the pool. She never seemed all that stupid to me, so I don't know why she tried to save my daughter in the most inefficient way possible. Eventually a recreation center employee heard her panicking and ran outside. He gave her CPR and she threw up a lot of water. They called an ambulance and my husband, and I met everyone at the hospital. Heather had a lot of bruises on her lower half. I asked what happened and Kelly told me about the pool net and everything. Plus how she hadn't immediately gotten someone else. I was so angry I yelled at the boys in her how she could see my daughter dying and not do anything. The first thing she said was literally while I kept yelling at Sadie to help her. This really pissed me off. She was blaming all this on her toddler. I know everyone mistakes, but seriously, when I asked her why she didn't sprint for help right away, she said she was overwhelmed and that I shouldn't attack her because my kid couldn't swim to save herself. The pool tube was around her waist and was trapping her upside down. This set me off. I wasn't still and disgusted with my brother, but her words made me break and lose it. I started to scream at her how pathetic she was and that she was just as bad as her family members who let her drown. I kept yelling until she started to sob and security made us stop. My husband and I were so upset we demanded to see the recreation center's footage from the pool security camera, and we saw exactly what happened. After we went back home I sent a short text to Kelly that I was sorry for losing my cool. I was completely out of line and blamed the wrong person to deal with it all. She sent back a paragraph saying I'm a psycho for blaming her for her own trauma response. She even said maybe it would have been better for my daughter to die than have a mom like me. Obviously I haven't contacted her or my brother since. My parents began to yell at me when I yelled at Kelly, so I haven't spoken to them much either. For Christmas we aren't joining them this year. My husband fully agrees with me. My best friend and her family live a few hours away, so don't see her as often as I'd like. Since it's just us for Christmas, she offered to have a stay at her nice house so my daughter can play with her kids. A couple days ago we stayed up drinking wine and talking. She knew about it, but I told her all the details for the first time. After I was done she asked if she could give me a bit of advice. I was curious what she wanted to say, so I said yes. She said what Kelly said was awful and she went way too far, especially with her text about my daughter. Plus it was stupid that her first thought was to yell at her toddler daughter to do something. Kelly could have handled it all way better with a calm start. Of course though she was panicking, so she couldn't think as clearly. I'm furious with my brother as well. I was so upset and was yelling at him too. It was what my sister-in-law said that really hurt and set me off. I was so panicked and wasn't thinking straight. I will never let my brother watch Heather while I'm busy doing something ever again. She said she understood why I felt so angry in the hospital, but I shouldn't have had such an emotional reaction, or at least should have found time to eventually sit down in person and apologize for my outburst. It was a stressful situation for everyone. The mean things Kelly said after were wrong. I should have sat down face to face to discuss all of our feeling and give both her and had the chance to apologize for what we said to each other. I'm feeling a lot more guilty now. I lashed out and she lashed out in turn. I talked to my husband about it, but he's still furious with them and says we don't know them anything. I miss my niece and nephew. Am I in the wrong here?